Hello, welcome to the Sunshine Connection. I'm Ian and Platy the Sunshine Platypus, and here having a conversation with Bruce and Ross. And we're going to be chatting about communication and starting with something that I've just been hearing recently, both article in LA Times and public radio show where the new age etiquette of communication has been put out that talks about things of phone calls specifically, and that one should only call people that are close in your lives, such as your parents or your family and such, and otherwise that texting or some other thing should be the way because it can be rude or other such things to do that. And so, yeah, just wanting to address that and the feeling that for me, in my experience, and I think that we were just chatting before a little bit, that this way of communicating that's more direct, whether it be directly in person or on a phone call, can bring a lot more connection with each other, more authenticity to the conversation, have the real-time effect, and just a plethora of other things. So I will open it up with that. And yeah, if either of you would like to start, and I hope that I can do that because I just realized I was bouncing the mic around.
I can start.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So in the connection I was talking about regarding what are the goals behind people connection and how are we relating to each other in a way that is a new way. Information age, since the last 30, 40 years, since the dawn of the internet, has provided with access and portals in which we can communicate other than in person. It very much like the phone was able to do that from over great distances and land masses to be able to communicate with each other, two-way communication, whereas in real time. That was just hugely important to the advancement of technology and connecting to each other. Now, with the internet, it's so fantastic. We've been able to see the news, like the war in Gaza and Hamas and Israel. Those kind of things in real time is a huge benefit to our relevance as communities bond closer together. But as a personal level, we've built this whole new etiquette regarding how we should use the internet, how we should use communication, and it's distilled it down to almost one-dimensional patterns where I send a text, I wait for a reply, someone who wants to reply to me, and there's this time delay. And that goes against what we adopted with the telephone, how we can communicate to others. So I think in line, there's this new patterning that's happening in our social interactions from a distance. I texted my sister, and she's like living like next door to me, just because it's more convenient to do that with, and she doesn't respond. And I'm like, Kathy, did you get my text? And she's like, oh yeah, I got that a while ago. Is she necessarily ghosting me because she has an attitude or an emphasis on etiquette? Mm-hmm. No, it's just more convenient. She knows the next time she sees me, she'll fill in the blanks. Yeah. I'm guessing. I still don't know because she still hasn't texted me back.
Yeah. Well, I would love to maybe go on one piece at a time of what we see as good communication. You just mentioned the real-time aspect, so maybe we can talk about that. Bruce, maybe you have some thoughts, and well, any of us, of course, share things. What could be the benefits of real-time communication? How does that help foster and nurture connection and positive communication?
It's well, it's one way to have a real conversation, authentic conversation. Although a conversation doesn't have to play out in real time. And people had before we had telephones, people had conversations via writing letters back and forth. So the main thing about a phone is that it gives us a way to have the same kind of conversation over a distance that we're having right here.
Yeah.
So it's it takes a form of communication and connection that is deeply rooted in our evolutionary history and makes it available to us across distances.
Yeah.
Um,
Something that I would add, because you were just saying about the phone conversation, similar to here, in that we can have that real time. Each of those places where we get closer and closer to a direct communication, such as this, is that we add more and more ways that we can get information from each other around that communication, such as, 80% of communication is nonverbal. So that's something that we can receive right now, and we can receive in video calls to an extent, but still, the video call is still two-dimensional. So again, the closer we get to this, the more we have that. So it's all kind of
that's true. I mean, the phone call is just voice, right? We don't have the visual, but we have the nuances of the sound of the voice, intonation. The interesting thing about video, so when people started getting burned out on Zoom during the pandemic, there was some research that went into that, and what was found was that the quality of the video on Zoom was not high enough to really get the facial expression connection. But because we had the visual, we were looking for it, and so our brains were working really hard to try to interpret faces in a way that we don't do when we're just talking on the phone, right? And so it's actually more work to have a conversation on a video chat than it is over the phone.
Interesting. And then I guess I did hear something about that. Then we start to adapt to that a little bit. It seems like what you're referring to. Yeah, we kind of had to come up with new ways for analyzing those facial things and stuff.
Yeah, well, or we just stop trying, I think.
Oh.
Yeah, I think that's, maybe as video technology gets better, that will become easier, but it didn't work.
Keep going, sorry, just making sure. Okay.
All right. Yeah, I agree. And interesting, I had not heard that before. And it does make somewhat success that even with the ability to see people's faces, which is usually one of the advantages of video conferencing versus phone conferencing. And it's interesting to see that it didn't deliver on what the expectations were for that medium. And things will need to be reassessed on the value of a Zoom call or whatever. But I think you're right, the pandemic forced us into a whole new form of communication, which is already muddled with the way we do it. It's almost like we have so many more options to communicate. We have to really be specific. There's a demand on the environment now to really define what is the goal of our communication as we relate to each other, and then use those goals appropriately. Like, what is the most appropriate form? And I think that speaks to the etiquette issue. It's like, all right, so like I had a boss one day tell me that I can't be too direct in my emails, that I needed to put emoticons in my emails because they were too terse. And my feeling at the time, back then, was like, they're just emails. They're directives. They're mostly just quick information that can be passively sit there and wait for you. It's not the phone call instead of the email was one way, or texting in this matter, was the way to get the back and forth on it. Not necessary for an email. It's just a passive information gathering tool, right? It sends you a message very much like, and then you sit on it and you wait, and then you wait to reply, like your pen pal writing letters that you mentioned earlier. But because I was failing in my communication, I started using emojis to do and all of it, and it improved the way I related to the recipient of those emails. Now I use almost maybe overuse the emoji, but because I really want to be clear that this is not serious. The smile says a lot about the demeanor in it.
Yeah.
And I think there is an etiquette issue. What do you do? And there are times when they speak to say, like, if you really want to reserve the phone call for loved ones or close ones who understand you, I could see why someone would say that there's an etiquette around it. But my constriction around that is that there's a rule. And I think that's once we get into the role patterning, we get into constructs where people can fall outside that, and then that starts to deem inappropriate behavior, and then we know inappropriate behavior because of the cancel culture and consent issues and things like that. So I think we need to really fine tune people's sensitivity towards how communication is happening in market and their reaction to it.
Yeah.
And I think it goes back to what I was saying about the intention, the true intention behind why we're communicating and how we're communicating.
Yeah, and I also think that speaks a lot to, and also your use of emojis and the happy face and stuff, is this idea of lighten up. We don't need to take offense to everything. Like, why don't we choose to see people's communications in the best light, or give them the benefit of the doubt that they're actually seeking a positive communication with us? Because why would I want to have a negative communication with you or anyone? Like, that doesn't feel good to me. So wouldn't I rather, one choice I have is to say, hey, Ross's communication to me was best intentioned, and how can I see it in a positive light rather than a negative one, or that he's whatever it is, put these stories that we can put on this. And I think that also comes into another piece of the whole puzzle, where as we lose bits of communication, especially nonverbal or any of those things, and like say texts or anything like that, is just, it's much easier to misinterpret what people are trying to get, or the communications to be had or whatnot. And so we can just as easily jump on this person is being a jerk, or whatever it is. So if we have equal choice to do that, maybe we can try to recalibrate and rebalance in I always want good communication because that feels good, and bad communication doesn't. So how about we just assume that everyone is doing that and doing their best, and if not, we can clarify it and maybe ask, like, hey, you said this and I'm not sure what that meant, or whatever, but just, again, back to the lighten up. And I think that, having a smiley face or laughing or whatever it is, like you said, can help do that. And I've experienced the same, just putting in that happy face, because it can totally shift the context of what someone receives.
Right.
And it's on the receiving end too. Everyone can be in a certain mood, or like maybe they've had a challenge, and so they might be expecting that your communication they just received is going to fall into place of these other difficult ones they've had. So if we can say, hey, here's a pleasant, nice thing that we're trying to have an interaction.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's the emoji is a way to put intonation into a text-based message. And the interesting thing is that before texting, written communication didn't have, and of any kind, didn't have that, or serious written communication didn't have any of those indicators.
Yeah.
And it was viewed as, when it did appear, if you put a smiley face in your letter to your, in a memo to your boss, he would be seen as frivolous.
Right.
Right. Inappropriate.
What is this saying here?
I was called one time where I was putting too many exclamation points on something. Right? So there you go.
Yeah. So that's just,
or using caps.
That's just changing culture.
Right.
What written communication, what it should look like, but also what it should convey.
Right.
I want to come back though to the point, Ross, that you made early on about you texted your sister and she didn't write back, and you don't know why she hasn't written back, and so there's what's the expectation for responding, and it's because sometimes as a recipient, you don't know if you should respond, and then there can be this kind of endless who speaks last kind of thing that goes on. So one of the things that's interesting about just the last, fairly recently, the ability to put reactions on text. Reaction, so you don't actually have to write back a substantive thing, but you can just say, "I got it, I agree," or "Yeah, that was funny."
Thumbs
or
up, emoji.
Thumbs up. Yeah. So that's, I think, that maybe is a way to bring that sense of closure into an interaction.
Yeah.
Without just leaving it hanging.
Yes, and I think it's interesting to look at all aspects of it, because I also just heard recently of someone feeling kind of dismissed or not much energy put in because of just receiving, a thumbs up on their big message that they wrote that had, feeling. And again, there's all the different levels of this, right? I mean, you could say that, oh, I left a voice message with all this feeling, and then someone just texted me back and they put their feeling back, but like you could compare that and say, well, that's not as much as my voice and the heart that I put into this, So again, it's all these things where it's kind of a communication breakdown just by nature of some of these parts of communication that we're missing. And ultimately, I think that that's where I would purport the value of getting as close to direct communication like this as possible, because then we can really see and feel each other's, energy on the subtle layers of like, do you even care? Do you want to be here chatting with me, or are you like, just get out of here kind of thing? So
I think there is this huge misstep in how the intention to apply to create connection through communication, yet because we're muddled in this, there's this breakdown in communication.
Yeah.
And so the scenes don't seem to add up very well.
Yes.
So that's an interesting thing.
Definitely.
You
Well,
wanna take a
speaking
close-up?
of, we have some friends who have just joined us,
Yes.
and we would like to go directly communicate with them in person.
What?
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll finish up this video and maybe shoot more, but hopefully that helped shed some light and encourage deeper communication with some of the things we talked about. I always like to include in these videos, something that we can all do to bring positive communication into the world and not get stuck in that helpless question of, well, what can I do? I'm just one person. So, regardless of money or anything, that we can do. And I think from my suggestion in this would just be take a moment in your life with anyone in your life and see how you can deepen that communication. Maybe if you were going to text someone, maybe give them a call or see if you can see them in person, and just add that extra deeper level to your connection and really focus on that positive communication with people in your life. Do you guys have something you'd like to add?
Yeah. Just try not to think too much about it.
Yeah.
Go with your gut, with what's most appropriate for you.
Yeah, and I guess the thing I would add is that different people have different preferences for how they like to communicate, and just with the people you know well and care about, try to respect those preferences.
Agreed. Thank you. Thank you for joining and chatting, and we'll see you next time on Sunshine Connection.